There are paintings that bring beauty into the world, and then there are paintings that show us the world as it truly is, cruel, fragile, and devoured by fear. Saturn Devouring His Son by Francisco Goya is one of those works. It's not just a painting. It's a scream frozen in time. Goya painted it in silence on the walls of his own home, where no one else was ever meant to see it. He didn't paint for fame or money or legacy. He painted because the darkness inside him had nowhere else to go. And when you stand before this image, when you see the god Saturn tearing apart his own child, you realize that this is not mythology. It's confession. In 1819, Francisco Goya bought a small house outside Madrid, La Quinta del Sordo, the house of the deaf man. He was already in his 70s, nearly deaf, disillusioned by war, politics, and humanity itself. Inside this quiet house, he covered his walls not with joy, but with nightmares. Over a dozen murals, twisted, violent, full of despair, painted directly onto plaster. They became known as the Black Paintings. No commissions, no audience, just the raw mind of a man trapped with his thoughts and haunted by what he saw in the world around him. In mythology, Saturn devours his children, prevent them from overthrowing him. But Goya's Saturn is not a god. He is something else. His eyes are wide with madness, his mouth stretched in horror. There is no crown, no power, no reason, only fear. This is not a god preserving his throne. It is a man terrified of time, aging, and death. It is time itself, devouring everything it creates. Goya was not painting mythology. He was painting himself and us. Saturn is not just a god of time. He is the mirror of human fear. The fear of loss. The fear of decay. The fear of being forgotten. In every brushstroke, you can feel Goya's trembling hand, his desperate attempt to understand what humanity becomes when stripped of hope. And perhaps the most terrifying thing is, he understood it too well. When you look at Saturn devouring his son, it's not the figure that terrifies you, it's the silence. There is no background, no context, no mythology, only darkness. The paint feels alive, as if it's decaying before your eyes. And when you look long enough, the painting begins to consume you, too, just like Saturn devours his child. Because Goya didn't paint a monster. He painted what happens when the human mind finally breaks. By the time Goya painted Saturn Devouring His Son, he had seen more death than most soldiers. He had lived through the Napoleonic invasion of Spain, the executions, the famines, the collapse of faith in humanity. His earlier works, elegant portraits, royal commissions, scenes of reason and progress, had all turned to ashes. He watched his country devour itself. Church against people, people against king. And so Saturn, devouring his son, became more than myth. It became Spain itself. It became mankind. In La Quinta del Sordo, Goya lived alone, deaf, surrounded by the echo of his own thoughts. He could no longer hear the world, but he could see it collapsing. His journals described nightmares, voices he couldn't silence, shadows that move without reason. He painted to survive, to exorcise his mind. Each black painting was not decoration. It was therapy, and Saturn was the darkest of them all, the embodiment of fear-devouring sanity. Goya's painting technique in Saturn is violent. There are no sketches, no corrections, only raw strokes, black and red colliding like wounds. He painted with his hands, his palette knives, his fingers. It feels less like painting and more like an act of survival. The thick, chaotic textures seem alive, as if Goya was trying to wrestle with something invisible. Perhaps he wasn't painting the monster he saw, but the one he felt inside himself. Saturn was a god of time, Kronos. In Goya's version, he is no longer divine. He is time made flesh blind and hungry. He devours his children as time devours everything. Youth, love, art, hope. But Goya's brilliance lies in this. He does not let us look away. He forces us to confront what we all are, both victim and predator. In Saturn Devouring His Son, Goya shows that humanity's greatest fear is not death. It's a realization that we, too, can become monsters. Goya painted Saturn devouring his son in the early 19th century, but predicted the horrors of the 20th. 2 world wars, genocides, dictatorships. Humanity consuming itself in the name of order, progress, and control. Artists and historians would later call Goya the first modern painter, not because of his style, but because of his truth. He showed what lies beneath civilization. A God that feeds on his children, a system that devours its own creators. Saturn is not myth anymore. He is history. Goya's darkness inspired generations. Picasso's Guernica, Francis Bacon's Twisted Figures, even films by Bergman, Lynch, and Del Toro, all carry his shadow. They inherited his question: what happens when reason dies and instinct takes control? Goya showed that madness is not chaos. It's the order the world stripped bare. When you look at Saturn, you see echoes in every modern image of horror, because Goya painted not what he saw, but what would come. In the end, Saturn Devouring His Son is not about a god or a myth. It's about us, about the father who destroys what he loves, the creator who fears his creation, the species that builds and ruins in the same breath. Goya's painting is not a warning. It's a mirror. It shows what happens when fear replaces compassion, when power replaces love. And it forces us to ask, are we still human, or are we all becoming Saturn? Saturn is not just a god of time. He is time. And time, like the god, is blind. It creates, it nurtures, and then it destroys, not out of cruelty, but because it must. In Goya's vision, Saturn is not evil. He is inevitable. He doesn't kill because he wants to. He kills because existence demands it. And that's why this painting is so terrifying. It doesn't show us sin, it shows us nature. We fear it because we recognize it in the world, in others, and most of all in ourselves. Goya painted Saturn without words, yet it speaks louder than any sermon. It speaks in color, in texture, in shadow. The black around Saturn isn't background. It's void. It's silence made visible. Every inch of this painting is a dialogue between light and nothingness, between creation and erasure. And in that silence, Goya found truth. That art doesn't always comfort. Sometimes it exposes what the soul tries to bury. Goya died in exile, far from his homeland. His black paintings were never meant for the world to see. Yet they outlived him, outlived kings, outlived centuries. Why? Because they speak the only truth that never ages. That beauty and horror are not opposites. They are twins. That art, like time, can destroy or preserve, depending on who is watching. Goya didn't ask us to admire Saturn. He asked us to understand what it means to be devoured, by time, by fear, by ourselves. Psychologists see in Goya's Saturn the purest form of fear, not fear of death, but fear of losing control. The image of the devouring father is a metaphor for every power that turns against its own creation, in politics, in religion, in family. Saturn is a ruler who destroys his people, the mind that consumes itself, the parent who fears their child's future. It's the eternal cycle of creation and destruction, and in painting it, Goya broke the silence that most of us still keep. When you look at Saturn Devouring His Son, it feels like the painting is looking back. The eyes of the god are not on the child. They are on you. Goya painted them that way on purpose, because he knew that one day, centuries later, someone would stand before it and see themselves, the madness, the fear, the hunger for control. And in that moment, the painting comes alive again, devouring not flesh, but the illusion that we are different from him. Because maybe we are all Saturn,